We are open for Q&A. Who wants to go first?
Then Sambrastic provides also hierarchy, so headquarters, subsidiaries, etc., and also provides master data, location, and so on. Can we get the same from IUBN?
No, and they're addressing different problems. So IUBN is an easy way to identify a legal entity, right? Hierarchy is a separate problem of then how do we group legal entities together? So there are two different challenges. So it won't address this, but of course, master data it will, right? That's the idea but again, IUBN is a standard, okay? These numbers, like I said, already exist because you can generate them the same way as anyone can go and generate their IBAN, right? If you have your bank account number, you can go and generate your IBAN. It's the same thing. If you have your local number, you can generate your IUBN.
And it exists globally for all countries in the world, for all kind of...
No, so just to be transparent, the reason we thought of this some years ago, but we didn't bring it to market because we know you need a community to drive standards. So today, we're in a way launching this journey of creating the standard.
So what will the tipping point be? So what scale do you have to get to before there's a tipping point and it becomes universally accepted? And how do you get there?
No, look, again, I think it is very scalable. That's the whole idea about it, the same way as phone numbers were scalable. So ultimately, the idea is to drive a standard by country. And I think actually creating the standard does not take a long time, right? We have proposals, and also there's a plan to actually then try and get this adopted with ISO. But of course, we're going to start, we have lots of large customers, and for sure we're going to start with working with them.
Perfect.
I don't think there's a tipping point, though. That's the point, right? Once the standard is established, my view is that if something is readily available, like the phone number, like the IBAN, you will eventually have mass adoption, right? Because there's no one, everybody's going to benefit from this. There isn't any losers. It's like nonsensical for us to be doing what we're doing today for these kind of numbers.
All right, so what's next? So I adopt the standard, I create that. Wouldn't it be the next step to put it in the hub or the place where everybody can consume it?
Yeah, so look, we obviously didn't evolve everything in the presentation, but in that listening hub, there was this idea of IUBN governance services. But at the end of the day, the same way as in the banking industry, they have SWIFT, which actually is a not-for-profit body around these standards. Ultimately, we need, if you like, a standardization mechanism. And I think IUBN is just the starting point. Others which I've spoken to and we've heard today, we actually need to drive a lot more standards. This idea of how we collect sustainability, ISEC data, all this stuff. Ideally, there should be more standards which are being driven. But you will need a governing body. So part of also in terms of what's next is looking to establish a non-for-profit governing body around IUBN governance services.
Hi, I just have to ask, this is probably funny one, but is the equivalent of phone numbers for humans is the equivalent for companies, not the email domain and website domain? Is that not the starting point?
I have also thought of that. So before this came up, we also thought of using the domain name. But there is no source of truth, right? And that just becomes more challenging. So I think the domain name will come and play into it. But when you go into the details, it's not a great identifier because you don't have a real source of truth. And ultimately, you want to standardize around a source of truth, right? So IBAN standardize around banks. Banks are the source of truth for bank accounts, right? And phone numbers, there is a source of truth for that. For websites, anyone can go create tons of websites. I think the website will start to play into it. That's also an idea which we've had, but it doesn't replace a high precision identifier.
My question is how you are going to convince others to follow this standard in their existing tools and systems so that it can be widely usable, because we can generate a number, but unless others are going to adopt it in their tools and systems, we cannot do much with this information. So what's your efforts and strategies on that?
No, like I said, so number one, we've been building a community. We want to define a governing body to actually help drive this, which will obviously be community-backed. Our view is this has to be an open standard, right? Closed standards simply are not scalable.
I have a question when it comes to the supplier grouping. So here we're talking really about the legal entities, but would there also be some logic behind the grouping of the legal entities?
No, I think that was similar to the earlier question. Grouping is a different challenge, so that also needs to be solved. But we have to solve this first, right? To be honest, if you don't have at the lowest level, an easy way to identify it, it's almost nonsensical to try and group them. But I also share with that, if you're going on a journey, you don't wait for all the traffic lights to go green, right? So I think there are different problems, but this one is one we need to solve first, and already will solve a lot of things. And then, of course, yes, we have to figure out the grouping. But without this, we can't move to the next stage.
Why do you think it hasn't been done before?
I honestly don't have, I'm baffled, by the way, because I think what we're doing today is absurd, right? And hopefully I've shared some good examples. I don't know, right? But many things, people didn't think about it, DNB was there. I can't really answer to it, but it's definitely not been done in an effective way. And frankly, I can't see a reason why, right? But it hasn't been done.
Test? Yeah, okay. Maybe not really a question, but shouldn't this be pushed also by European Union or something?
So the idea eventually of standards, because we've looked into this, would be that it gets adopted as an ISO standard, right? So that will be the ultimate way to go. But we do view that there needs to be a governing body, the same way as you might have an IBAN ISO standard, but you do have SWIFT as a non-for-profit governing body to define the standards. Because like I said, I think this is just the starting point. In general, if we focus on supplier experience in the supply chain and the data problem, identification is just the first challenge, right? We still ask a crapload of redundant questions to suppliers around sustainability, carbon footprint, information security. And our view would be we should be trying to create more standards because nobody is benefiting from asking the same thing in slightly different ways.
Looking at how IBAN evolved and how long it took and how much change required in different countries to adopt it, and it's not an easy process. I mean, have you thought about integrating with the different company registrars and creating from that kind of automatically that unique identifier? There are already companies that tried some things like that to integrate with different local registries and create a golden record.
We don't need to do this. Yeah. And that's to explain the concept. It is a standard. So these identifiers, they exist today. They can be generated. So IBAN, it was more around payment infrastructure, right? So for sure, adoption in terms of other vendors signing up to it, that's one challenge. But in terms of the numbers, and that's why we think it's great, there is no data migration cost, right? It's not that we have to go and create these numbers. We're not planning to make a central database with all these numbers because these databases already exist, right? That's what DNB did, and it was silly. It's just generating the number according to the standards. So anyone can go and generate their IUBN. Okay, they exist, it's implicit. They exist today. That's the point we're trying to make. So it should be very easy in general to be adopted, or as easy as it can get, let's put it that way.
So in procurement, the closest thing to that I would think is UNSPSC. Yet none of us here, I think, will operate using that. We all use a derivation of that. We'll sometimes reference back to it. Do you think there's I think
it's very different.
There's no parallel here.
UNSPSC is a number which is closed, defined by a singular body, the UN, right? The IUBN is a standard which standardizes the ultimate source of truth, right? So these numbers, in terms of the company number of a legal entity, we already use them today and they exist. It's not creating a new number, right? Product data is more challenging in terms of standards, and I get it, there needs to be more work done there, but here, this is much simpler. Because again, the registrar company's house, no one's gonna question that is the source of truth for a legal entity, right? For UNSPSC, that's not the source of truth. It's a UN product structure, which serves the UN, right? That's why we all might use it, but again, it's a closed number. It doesn't scale.
Okay, thank you so much, Kostas. And that's a wrap. as some may have come up a little bit in Kostas' presentation, we are a bunch largely of software engineers. We're not an events company, but I thought it went really well, that it could not have gone this well without your engagement, and hopefully you'll start to adopt some of these ideas as well. Pun is absolutely intended on that one. Now, our source of truth for this event will obviously be the feedback that you leave. I hope for 100% compliance on the feedback form, and there are even some guards at the door that will collect these forms from you if you try to get away. Yes, we have governance in place on this. Be honest, be full in your feedback. We will truly appreciate it if you can give it to us. And then enjoy DPW. We have our own session, by the way, on Thursday at 9:35. Hope you can make that, but there's tons and tons of other great sessions as well. And now I'm the only one between beers and drinks and networkings, and I'm going to leave it with that. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of the next couple of days. Thank you.